Amethyst is a data-driven game engine. I said 1,000 times that this game engine doesn't have an editor. This means that it's difficult to start using it. For this reason, I am doing this series of videos where I will talk about Amethyst and how to use it. The first thing that you have to do is to, of course, install Rust. Once Rust is installed, what you have to do is to go in the terminal using this command cargo new. Now that your application is created, enter inside the directory that you just created, list what's inside, and you can see that there is the cargo 2ml file. What you have to do here is to add the Amethyst dependency. Here you can see that I have just inserted the Amethyst dependency. I have inserted here the version 11 and the features Vulkan. This means that actually Amethyst will use Vulkan as backend, as rendering backend. Back into terminal, just execute cargo run in order to see if everything works. And that's it. As you can see in the terminal, it's executed the hello world. So this means that Amethyst get compiled and the project is ready to be used. But before starting using Amethyst, it's necessary that you understand two key concepts. For a moment, let's imagine in object-oriented. You have a watch and you want to process the time of this watch. What you do, you simply take the object that contains all the data, for example, the time, the color of the watch, or the size, and so on, and you simply perform the operation to advance the timing. As you can see, all the data are inside a container, a storage. Instead, in the data-driven, what happens is that all the data are organized per type. This means that you will have a couple of storages. For example, you will have the time storages, the color storages, and so on. This means that you have to process the data in another way. But before understand how to process the data, let me add another example. You have different watches. One alarm clock, the other that you have inside your phone, the other watch that you bring in your hand, and so on. All these watches, even if they are different, in data-driven will put the time data inside the same storage. Now, the ECS come into play. An entity, you can imagine it like an object, but the difference is that the object can be really specialized. For example, you can have the watch object or the pen object or the pencil object and so on. And each of these objects has all the data that describe that object. Instead, the entity is something that doesn't have any data inside it. It's something that is clean, void. And to this entity is possible to attach some components. And the components are some data that will describe the entity. For example, your watch will have the timer component, will have the color component, the size component, and so on. Now come into play the system, so we can complete the ECS. The systems are just an algorithm that take one or more storages and perform some operations. Look that I'm not saying that it takes a single object or more objects, but it takes an entire storage. Let's imagine the example of time advancing. I could have a system called timer system that takes the timer storage and perform the time advancing on all the components that are stored inside this storage. This means that the time advancing happen to all the watches that are stored and you don't know nothing about the object. So now that you understood these two key concepts in Amethyst, you know how the entire Amethyst works. In the next video I will show how a system can take the data and works. But from this video it's everything. Thank you. See you next week. Bye bye.